Are you an artist that can take a reference and then recreate that reference hyper-realistically with that much effort? If yes, then that makes you an amazing artist. But does that qualify you to be able to ace the Part B questions of any design examinations like UCEED, NID, or NIFT? No, it doesn't. My name is Divine, and I managed to score AR 12 for my UCEED in 2024. For my Part B, I scored 77, which is pretty good. So I would like to share all of the tips that I used back then to score this much, and hopefully all of this will help you as well. So come with me, let's see what they are. Any design examination expects you to be able to create an idea or a concept or a product, etc., completely from imagination. And in other words, that is to expand your mental library. So naturally, the next question might be, how exactly do I expand my mental library, right? And how do I get myself to think beyond an image, an existing image, or an existing concept? Well, this is an interesting dilemma, which I went through personally. So in this video, we'll be covering 3 tips on what exactly you should do to score more marks for Part B, specifically in UCEED entrance examination. So tip number 1, strategic planning during exam preparation. And I know this is quite obvious, and it not only applies to design examinations, it applies to every other examination, right? Especially for design, we don't have a specific syllabus per se. They can ask questions from like literally anywhere, right? So it's very important to be strategic about your preparation, because there's no way we can study everything under the universe that they could possibly ask within just 2 years, 3 years, no matter the time. There's going to be something that we can't cover because we don't have a syllabus. So obviously you might be aware of this, but I'm going to give you certain things that you need to take note of, and that is human figures, perspective, a little bit of shading just to denote the lighting, more on that later, and observation / attention to detail. So you guys might know about human figures and perspective and even shading a bit, right? In this thing, human figures hold the most importance. And why? Because we as humans tend to take note of living things more naturally. That is psychology, that is a fact. So more than the perspective itself, if there's a human figure and if there's perspective in the same image, and perspective is like perfect, imagine. But if the human figure is not up to the mark, then quickly everybody's attention will go to the human figure being wrong more than the perspective itself. Even if the perspective is wrong and the human figure is also wrong, people would notice the mistake of the human figure more. Why? Because we're humans, and humans tend to notice errors in humans itself. So that is one thing. We're all aware of that. These 3 things we know. But one thing that people usually miss out on is the last point, which is observation / like details. When I talk about observation and details, I'm not talking about that typical point where you need to look around you. Of course, that is what I'm leading up to, but then I'm going to show you what happens when you do this. And it's going to be a bit surprising the way we tend to deal with questions after we apply this tip. So imagine there's an example. There's a question where you have to draw like a scene in a bedroom, right? Obviously, everyone's just going to add a bed, maybe a cupboard, maybe a desk and a chair like I have over there, curtains, window. Yeah, maybe that's about it, right? And no matter how beautifully you draw this, there's a limit to how much you can stand out, because almost everyone, all these thousands and thousands of students or applicants are gonna do exactly the same thing. So how exactly are you supposed to stand out? Well, by adding a little bit of a sprinkle of personality into your drawings. So what does that mean, right? What if I just change up the bed into a bunk bed? Right? Because I used to have a bunk bed when I was like really little. I don't remember much, but based on that observation, based on that memory that I have, I might just add it in there. And what if I can show the hobbies of this particular person in that room, who owns that room, right? For example, if they're a poster enthusiast, I can just add posters on the walls. If they're someone who really likes to read books, then I can maybe scatter books around their room, right? What if I also show that they're a pet lover? So they have this pet, maybe they have a pet bed right next to their bed as well, and maybe there's like a cat or a dog lying in it, you know? Things like this adds a lot to your drawing. And this is something that skill alone cannot accomplish, right? So that is my first point. All right, now on to the second point. So this one is about time management, and we all know that this is a very common point yet again, but most people have a misconception that time management is all about drawing your sketches or your drawings like really fast. Yes, that is one part of it, but there's a limit to how fast we can draw our main drawing, right? If we try to exceed a certain limit, then our drawings will look like absolute garbage, and that is fine because that has happened to me and it really got me down. I was so demotivated. I did not feel like drawing anymore because every time I tried to keep a timer and actually finish my drawings within that amount of time, I used to fail. And I used to not be able to complete in time, and my drawings also looked really bad. So then that used to get me down. It used to get me through a lot of art block, and I was stuck, basically. The best thing that you can do, especially during the initial preparation time when you're just getting your muscle memory and your muscles to coordinate with your brain, because your brain has an idea about how everything looks, but your muscle, your hand, is not yet trained in a particular way that it can actually transfer all that knowledge that you have in your head onto paper, right? So in that phase, when talk about time management, not only when you're actively drawing like the final piece, but way before you start your artwork. So we all know about thumbnail sketching, right? Those who don't know about thumbnail sketching is basically like a small version of your canvas, about the size of a thumbnail, which is why it's called thumbnail sketches, that you draw before you start your actual artwork so that you can plan out, idea, and conceptualize how your final piece will look like. But your thumbnail sketch is going to be very rough, very small, and very limited when it comes to detail. You're just trying to lay down all the elements that are going to be in your piece, find the composition, and understand how it will look like. This can also help you churn out more ideas. For example, you can make like 4 to 5 different thumbnails within just 2 to 3 minutes max. And this will really help you put down all of your ideas and choose the best version out of this. And that is one way you can save time, right? Rather than starting with the image already and then not liking the idea, erasing it, all of that is going to waste so much time. So thumbnail sketches are your biggest friends and helpers during your examination. So start the practice of using thumbnail sketches right now. And the next thing is about when you start sketching, right? You always lay down a rough sketch and then you finalize it with proper clean line art, right? So one thing I can suggest when you're laying down your sketch is to always hold your pencil from the middle, such as this. We usually tend to hold it really close to the lead like that, but this is only meant for when you're actually drawing details for your sketch. But when you're just sketching something out, try to hold your fingers away from the lead with pencil. What does this do? First of all, this will make your sketches really light and flowy. This will almost force your hand or your wrist to lift up from the paper, which will help you quickly make the rough sketch. Otherwise, if you're going to hold it really close to the lead, your wrist will be resting on the paper, and this will really slow down your range of motion. And hence, you'll take longer to finish up your rough sketch, and it'll be much darker too. Because if you're holding it like this, your sketch is going to be much lighter, hence you wouldn't need to do a lot of erasing. In fact, I suggest that your sketch has to be light enough that it need not be erased to begin with. Just a light bit of touching up here and there, and that should be enough. It should be really light, that only you'll be able to see it and no one else. That is how light a sketch should be. And of course, you won't get this immediately, but eventually with constant practice with these few tips that I mentioned, you'll see results in no time. And now time for tip number 3, which is live sketching. I know a lot of you must be shaking your heads right now. Oh, not this point again. Everyone keeps talking about live sketching. What's so great about this? Well, I was once a strong believer that I have access to internet. I can search something up on Pinterest and easily get results for it and just copy that down. Technically live sketching, right? Well, not really, obviously. Why? Because, imagine seeing something in a photo and seeing that in real life. Your perception is completely different. What you see on your screen might be a picture of a 3D environment, but you're seeing it on a flat 2D screen. Your perception is going to be different. Your perception of depth, especially, is going to be different. But when you're live sketching, you're perceiving things in actual 3D, and that actually helps your mental library expand and take in more information faster than when you're just looking at an image and trying to copy it down, or even trying to use that as your live sketching. To a certain point, of course, you guys are free to do whatever you want. I've used plenty of references from Pinterest just to learn anatomy, because we can't dissect someone in public and learn muscle anatomy and everything from that. But especially for questions like scene drawing questions, composition questions, All of this requires you to have a strong sense of skill, observation, and understanding, which you get through live sketching. Plenty. All right, so those are the 3 tips, and I hope these are really helpful. And if you can apply this into your daily training for Part B questions, especially for UCEED, then I think it will really help you out in the long run. These tips are not just exclusive for UCEED. Of course, I was talking in aspects of UCEED, but these can be applied to any Part B questions for that matter, anything drawing related, especially when you're trying to kind of improve your creative thinking, your design thinking, your conceptualization. So yeah, thank you. My name is Javine, and tips can also be applied for all the other. So tip number 1. Sun also moves around, you know? We would